Alright, time for perhaps one of my most important videos. This one is more high concept because it doesn't let you build something amazing, it just helps you manage your stuff. Because a lot of people don't understand how to actually use electricity in an efficient way. Most groups just brute force electricity and just force it to work. Now, this requires me to tell you a little story just in one of the events I was in. Long story short, everyone in that server was poor, mostly because every player there was good, so they wouldn't let you snowball that quickly. So everyone was a bit power hungry. And I was in charge of electricity, so the few bits of power we were able to generate, I had to keep the lights on just using that. So I had to really dig down and make sure our energy was efficient. Now, this is where it gets tricky. There is only one reliable electric source in the game, and that is a small generator. And nobody uses that because it uses low grade. But this thing always generates 40 electricity. The solar panel generates 20 at its best, and then it goes down as the night comes over, and then as night it's completely out, and then it gets a bit of energy until it reaches its peak again. So there's a flow. Wind turbines, at the highest it can generate a lot of electricity, but at its lowest it just generates none, depending on the wind flow, and that's something difficult to manage. Not only that, but all batteries suffer a 20% penalty for whatever power is coming in. So if you put 100 power, you're actually losing 20 power. You're only actually putting 80 power in. So basically a lot of groups are just used to brute forcing it with their lowest lows are still enough to just keep the lights running. But that's not how it worked in these events. Since we were poor, I had to manage it so our net gain of electricity was still positive, but it wouldn't show. It would constantly dip down and then go back up. But to a lot of people who weren't aware, that freaks them out. Now, I'm going to use MS Paint on this sign to effectively try to convey that. So energy is basically 1 equals 1. So if you're using 1 energy, but you're also getting 1 energy, you're at 0 effectively. Meaning your battery isn't going to be running out, your lights will stay on. If you are at 2, and you're using 1, then that means you're at a +1. So in that +1, you're effectively starting to charge more energy, more battery life slowly, but still. And obviously, if you're in the negatives, you're losing energy. Now, the problem is that energy flow isn't a 1 equals 1 situation. You're basically at the penalty, it's actually 0.8 for every 1 bit of energy. And not only that, but most energy sources being unreliable means it's not 0.8, it's about 1.8. It will usually go up and down, and it can really backfire on you. But not only that, the amount of energy you're using is all over the place, where some systems turn on momentarily, some go into overdrive, and then people attach things or remove things. It gets out of control real fast. And look at this, it's becoming nighttime. So the solar panel is just becoming, useless. It's only generating 3 power, and a lot of people tend to just attach it to a battery directly. And what that ends up being is that the effective power of the solar panel is never at a comfortable level where you can justify using even half of a small battery. So you need to figure out a way to squeeze it down. Alright, MS Paint time. So think of the highest high and the lowest low of the solar panel. You go at your 20, but as the day progresses and it becomes darker, it goes down until it becomes 0. Then it goes back up as the sun rises, goes back to 20, and then goes back down to 0. And, add, repeat, ad nauseum, all that stuff. What you want to do, what you should do, is create a system in which you just find out the mean or the median or whatever you want to call it of the energy flow, enough to balance out the solar panel being on at the day and it running out at night. You squeeze it down, which on the worst case scenario is actually at about an 8, but in most average cases, if you're pointing the solar panel at the right place and there's nothing blocking it, no mountains or whatever, it will be at about a 10 to 10.5 energy actually being produced. Introducing this little circuit here. This one's a classic. I didn't make it, but it's one that was taught to me. This is the green line. This stabilizes your energy flow So it will last you, or at least the solar panel will last you across the day and the night by making sure you can only use as much as a solar panel would, mathematically generate towards the charge. So solar panel into a branch, and it goes 10 and 10. One of those 10s, the one on the left, goes into the OR switch. The other one into another branch. This branch is 1 and 9. The one goes into the blocker pass-through, and then the other one goes into the battery. Then the battery's output will go into the blocker, and then the blocker will go into the OR switch. And now you have only 10 power to use, but this way your battery or your charge or whatever will never run out, even if you use it at max power, at 10 at all times. Like I said, this thing is essentially the green line, filtering it out to how much is being used, and essentially during the day, the solar panel will be using all its power to both charge your power, use your electronics or whatever, but also charge the battery. And at night, or if your solar panel were to be destroyed, the battery will take over. So you'll always have something that's powering up your electronics. And essentially it allows your battery to rest and just charge up so it can survive through the night. Now, this next concept to explain requires you understanding the previous things. So we're going to use this admin generator to simulate having stabilized about 300 power. Essentially, you understand that your power source flows in between 300 usable power. And it's all coming into this big battery, or large battery, I mean. So this would be, in a regular circumstance, extremely wasteful because your large battery can only utilize 100 power, or only generates 100 power on the output, and yet you're taking in 300. Using the math I explained, it comes around to about 125 to 130 power that a large battery needs in order to be at a 1-for-1 of power usage, meaning you're effectively wasting more than 50% of the energy coming into it if you had set it up that way. And the best way to manage that would be to create a branch and just siphon the exact amount of power you need to have the large battery run at full capacity. Let me explain that. Let's say you manage to use 100 of the large battery power. So that's 100%. Mathematically, it would be improbable for it to run out if it would always be receiving about 130 power. It would essentially be going 1-for-1 in intake and output. So you don't need to be putting even more or extra energy into this. Sometimes it might only look like it's hovering at around, 6,000 energy, but if it stays within that area, it should never really run out. And with that extra power, you could, charge even more batteries to do more things later. So this is the best way to make use of your electricity. Because I have seen teams put like 600 power into one battery, which is pointless. Now let's say, using this blue line to represent this, that even with using stabilizers, your power intake still isn't enough to make up for it. Where for the most part, the electronics you have on are more of a drain than your battery can replace. So instead, what you could do is just start adding switches. Just add a switch. So anything you're really using, if you don't need it at the moment, just turn it off. And that saves a whole lot of energy. It's a little, blunt for me to say that, but yeah, sometimes you just need to turn things off. You could even make this automatic so the system turns itself off. But yeah, sometimes just switching things on and letting the battery rest helps out tremendously. The thing is, like in the event I was in, people kept freaking out because I kept turning things on and off. I had attached switches to a lot of systems that we couldn't automate yet. And some of those systems, like the furnaces, are a huge burden on the battery, especially if they aren't working, or at least working in full capacity. So sometimes it's better just to switch it off, give the battery some breathing room. Alright, this next part is actually pretty fun for me. So, like I already said, 1 power actually equals 0.8 power because of the penalty. So, if you want to run something that's 10 power, you need 12.5 power. Now, what if you only have 4 power to run 12.5 powers worth of stuff? Well, this little equation here comes out to 3.125. What does that mean? Yeah, to simplify it, just ignore these other numbers here and just say you can only run this system a third of the time. In effect, I'm trying to explain temporary systems. Let's say through the course of your usage of power, your furnaces, everything attached to your large battery, you're left over with little bits of energy and you're like, what should I do with this? This is a good way to do a little bit of piggybacking. Let's say you're only down to 5 energy and you put 5 energy into a small battery, which then equals 4 energy going in. What I was trying to explain, that little MS Paint thing there. What you can do with this is activate temporary systems by abusing the battery's 15 energy output. So remember, no matter what, a battery will always release its maximum output. It doesn't matter how much energy you're actually inputting into it. So even though you're getting 5, you can use 15. And you can do it for temporary systems that trigger on and off, either because of a switch or something like a pressure pad, like this same searchlight. Sit on it, click it, and it'll be on and active. Now the battery is actually using the 10 energy, which is way more than coming in. But of course, the second you're off it, then it goes back down to 0 and it gives it a chance to breathe. This little method of attaching a small battery to just whatever little output you have, as long as you keep in mind this little equation up here that you can only have it on for a third of the time, then you should more or less equalize the energy usage. So yeah, set it up for temporary things like lights in the night, searchlight for whatever reason, or stuff that can only work in at certain times, like a filter system that takes out the wrong items from a machine, from a box, stuff like that. Just something super temporary, and you can cheat out more power this way. So yeah, like I said, as long as the power coming in equalizes the power going out, in this case the battery's at 100%, and the power coming in is roughly 1-for-1 for it, after doing some math, it's gonna stay within the same power blips. You'll see it go up a little bit and then go down a little bit, but effectively it's at a net neutral. It will not run out and it will never overfill. Your battery is in a homeostasis of power. And this is what you want to achieve. Of course, it's harder said than done when you have a lot of unreliable energy sources, but the best thing to do is narrow it down so much to the point where you can control it. And if it's out of control sometimes, just click a button every now and then, flip a switch, and then it'll be done. You see? Perfection.